Hello and welcome to another episode of the Jim Powell Report. We're here in Chilmark with Professor Alan Dershowitz this afternoon, and it's just a real honor to speak with Alan Dershowitz here about a variety of topics here at his home on Martha's Vineyard. Alan, it's great to see you.
It's great to see you on my new deck. I have to tell you, Vineyard workmen are fantastic. They did such a great job.
It's beautiful.
On this deck and on my house. Jim Mahoney and his staff, large staff. I love Vineyard workmen and workwomen. They're terrific.
They are. I highly recommend them.
Yeah.
Glad you discovered them.
Yeah.
And we make sure that they maintain it well for you too. So that's great. Well, you have a lot of projects going on. There are a lot of things going on in the world. We could start with world events. So last summer when I was here at your home, we spoke about what you were doing with Israel, and Hamas was digging tunnels underneath children's schools.
Right.
There's a lot going on in Israel. What's become of that?
Well, I just came back from Israel. My granddaughter graduated Harvard Law School, Phi Beta Kappa, summa cum laude, and she's going off to Oxford to study. And I took her as a present for graduation to Israel and to France, and she had never been there. And we went into the tunnels, and we went on a helicopter trip over the Golan Heights and met the Prime Minister. We had a wonderful trip. Everybody in Israel is worried about Iran. The Israelis are unanimous in being concerned about this deal. They really think that Iran, within 8 to 10 years, will develop nuclear weapons. And of course, the leaders have said essentially they would use it against Israel. One of their leaders said, look, if they bomb Israel, they'll destroy the Jewish state. It's a one-bomb state. And if Israel retaliates, it will only cause damage to Islam and to Iran because there are so many more people. When you have leaders like that, you just can't trust them with nuclear weapons.
No. Well, hasn't Israel categorically said that they want the annihilation? I think that was the word. They want to annihilate.
That's Iran's word. That's the leader. The leader of Iran has said Israel must be annihilated. You know, the last time a leader said that the Jews were to be annihilated, he almost succeeded, and it can't be allowed to happen a second time.
And that was back in
the 30s,
World War
right?
II.
Yeah, in the 40s, right?
Well, these are the type of issues that it doesn't really matter what the popular political thought is or commentary by the pundits here. The reality is that Israel is 9 miles by 40 miles.
Yeah.
They're small.
You could really see it when you fly by helicopter. I showed it to my granddaughter. You can actually see both sides of Israel from the air. You can see the beginning and the end as it.
It's about the size of Rhode Island, isn't it?
Well, it's a little bigger. It's the size of New Jersey.
New Jersey.
But much of it, the arable section, is about the size of Rhode Island. The populated section, because much of it is the Negev, which is just desert. But it's a thriving democracy, trying desperately to make peace with allies and enemies who swear to its destruction.
And Israel's productive with all of the patents, isn't it? The second leading patented.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful PBS Inside Israel documentary that you were co-produced with, I think. Yeah. But it was wonderful, David Greenberg. And I learned a lot about Israel and what a great ally for peace in the Middle East.
And no country...
And sanity.
Right. No country in history in 60 whatever years has exported and manufactured more life-saving technology. They're on the cutting edge of medical innovations, and the secret is when Arab leaders get sick, they secretly go to Israel to be treated, and they deny it. But Israel will treat anybody. They're treating the Syrians now, who are coming over the border, having been killed or wounded by Assad. So Israel gets a rough deal in Europe and in some parts of the world, but if you go there, you see what a complicated and interesting country it is.
I like that. It is complicated, and it's wonderful. But its greatness is trying to be squelched. And so, I really want to see how the multifaceted verification process is actually going to work out. It really seems like it's a shady deal.
Well, you worry when they want 24 days advance notice so they can move things around. If they're not doing anything wrong, hey, come and inspect me, instantaneously. We have nothing to hide. They have something to hide.
Well, isn't that also part of that principle is based on when in Iraq, when the U.S. went in, both times, but the western border of Iraq was never sealed off by the Allied forces, creating an opportunity, a great avenue to move all the weapons of mass destruction to Syria, and why was Saddam Hussein hung by his people? For using weapons of mass destruction.
Even despite that, I think we made a mistake by going into Iraq on the ground and owning the country and basically taking it over. It's now a disaster area, and it made it impossible for us, I think, to take, even if we have to, surgical military action against Iran. Americans are fed up with war, Afghanistan, Iraq, and even if Iran started to develop nuclear weapons, I'm not confident that President Obama would employ the military option. He says he would. I sat, as I'm sitting with you in the Oval Office, he looked me in the eye and he said, "Alan, you've known me for a long time. I don't bluff. Iran will not be allowed to develop nuclear weapons, and I'm not taking the military option off the table." The Iranians, however, think he did take the military option off the table.
And that worries our Arab allies.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of worry behind this. I want to be hopeful.
I do too.
But also I look at history, and Michael Oren, the Israeli ambassador to the United States, wrote a wonderful expose on the history of the United States in the Middle East since 1776.
It's amazing because it was a book about this thick and it became a bestseller in the New York Times, and it was a very serious book. Michael's a good friend of mine and a wonderful, wonderful
Very
man.
intelligent and articulate. Well, you have to shift gears here to another book. You have one coming up called Abraham. Tell us
Abraham,
about it.
the world's first but certainly not last Jewish lawyer. My argument is Abraham was the first lawyer. He argued with God over the sinners of Saddam. He said, what if there are 50 innocent people? How can you condemn the whole city? Makes the first kind of moral argument about proportionality, and he convinces God, which is so interesting. God says, all right, for the sake of the 50, I will not destroy the city. And then, like a good lawyer, he gets them down. How about 40? How about 30? How about 20? How about 10? He stops at 10. And so I use that story and a number of the other stories in the Bible as kind of metaphors for how lawyers operate. And I create like 5 or 6 categories of lawyers. Yeah, I have the cover is Abraham carrying a lawyer's briefcase, arguing with God.
Yes. Well, he...
and I have the
and
blurbs.
he was called of God, so he definitely was qualified.
Right. And I have 3 blurbs in the back of the book. One, the former chief rabbi of Great Britain. Another, a Protestant minister who I used to teach with, Harvey Cox. And the third, 2 friends of mine who are both atheists. So I have a rabbi, a minister, and 2 atheists walk into a bar. It sounds like the beginning of a joke, but it's the blurbs for the back of my book.
And you're able to put those together.
Yeah.
Well, we don't want to release all the secrets from it, but...
well, this is 4,500 years old, so there aren't too many secrets left from the Bible, but I try to...
But we're all still learning it from it.
Oh, yeah. No, it's an amazing book, and I try to bring a new perspective from a lawyer's point of view, because we're used to reading texts as to how one might interpret the Bible in ways relevant to assessing the legal profession, morality, and a range of other issues.
And in that, bringing that up, analyzing morality and talking about issues that are moral seems to be something that's very vogue right now with the Supreme Court, with the equality in marriage ruling and different rulings that are coming out. What do you see as developing with the our Supreme Court, and what kind of evolution do you see?
I don't see an evolution. I see unpredictability and a lot of randomness. One day they come up with a decision that the liberals like. Another day they come up with a decision that conservatives like. It always seems to be 5-4, and usually it's Justice Kennedy, sometimes the Chief Justice Roberts, who are the swing votes. For me, the great thrill is, I've taught. I taught Justice Kagan. She was my student in my criminal law class. I know most of the justices, so when I read their opinions, I hear their voices. I invited Justice Scalia to my class a few years ago. We debated the Constitution. I recently went back to the Supreme Court for the 50th anniversary of me being a law clerk there, and we had lunch with the justices, the surviving law clerks. There were 18 of us, I guess, and about 15 were still around. So we all had lunch with the justices, and they were curious, asking us about the Supreme Court back 50 years ago, because they're younger than we are.
They weren't there.
Yeah, yeah.
So what advice do you have, or what would you like to see the Supreme Court do?
Less political, less polemical, more based on enduring legal principles, more consensus. Not every issue should come before the Supreme Court. Take, for example, even gay marriage. I personally support equality in marriage. I'm not sure it wouldn't have been better for the justices to have left it to the states. I think every state would have adopted equality in marriage. Actually, my solution was not marriage. I actually wrote a piece which was somewhat influential, in which I argued, let's do away with the state having anything to do with marriage. Marriage should just be a religious institution. Everybody should be able to get a civil union. You want to get a civil union, you go, you're obliged, you have to do certain things, you have to, you pay taxes as a couple. But if you want to get married, find a rabbi, a minister, a priest, an imam who'll marry you. And if you're two guys, don't go to the Catholic Church, they're not going to marry you. If you're a Jew and a non-Jew, don't go to an Orthodox rabbi, he's not going to marry you. But marriage should be up to religions. It is a sacrament. The state doesn't engage in baptisms, it doesn't engage, thank God, in circumcisions. It shouldn't engage in marriages.
That's right.
We should leave that to religious institutions, and let's just have everybody get civil union. That would be so much more easily acceptable.
Be civil about it.
Yeah, the key is equality. We just
that's
have
right.
to treat everybody equally.
Right.
That's the key.
I'm thinking about it. Divorce is a great business in the country.
Well, when the state sanctions marriage, what it does is it sanctions a lie, because it makes people stand up there and say, I am marrying you until death do me part. How many marriages last until death do me part?
That's
less than half.
That's a death
Right,
sentence.
less than half. And so the state, knowing that, so if the state were to give civil unions, they would say, here you have a contract, you stay married as long as you like. If you want to be uncivil union, just come, we'll sign a paper. You're no longer, we'll have to make you pay alimony, we'll have some child issues, but we're not going to get involved in the sanctity of marriage. That's a religious institution.
And it's personal, too.
Yeah, very personal, yeah.
That's a nice opinion. I'm glad to hear you share that, because I agree with it, too. That's very interesting. And so as I read through a couple of your books recently, but I went back to the Genesis of Justice.
I love that book. Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
I really did, because you have 10 different stories in there. And I like that, 10 commandments, 10 stories, and you follow it through. And I want our readers to think about it, if they haven't seen this book, that they might want to get a copy of it. It's an older book.
Yeah, but my thesis really is you can't understand the 10 Commandments without understanding the 10 stories in the book of Genesis that led to the 10 Commandments. Why do we have a commandment that says, thou shalt not bear false witness? Because Joseph was the victim of a woman who falsely accused him of trying to molest her, Potiphar's wife. And so we learn the lesson, and we put a commandment there. Thou shalt not kill. Cain kills Abel and gets away with it. He becomes a builder of cities. So we need a commandment. And you go through every one of the commandments. In Exodus, in the book of Exodus, you can find a story. It basically is the common law in the book of Genesis that explains. And the essence of democracy, the beginning of democracy, is the word because or therefore. A ruler doesn't say, just do it. A good democratic ruler says, do it. Well, that's what my mother used to say. But a good ruler says, do it because. For example, there's something in the Bible that says, you should be kind to strangers because you were once strangers in the land of Egypt. And that's a beautiful term. And the implication is, you may once again be strangers in some other land, so be kind to strangers. There's a because.
Yes. And with that root and story, I'm glad I read this book early on. I've been going through your books. I've read Chutzpah and
when I write this new book, it'll be my 33rd in 33 years.
Whoa,
so,
excellent. There should be an anniversary party for that.
Good.
Do you have plans for a book signing?
I'll probably, this book won't be in published form until the end of August, but we'll probably try to do something, maybe beginning of September.
There'll be a party or something to go to. Well, that's wonderful. Now, I know that later on coming up in August, we'll have a few visitors here on
Right.
the island, and suddenly the Vineyard will become the summer White House.
Right.
I hope that you get a chance to visit with some of the people here.
Well, I'm going to be going to a Hillary Clinton event. I'm not sure that the president is as anxious to see me as he may have been in past years. I've been fairly critical of the Iran deal, and I think if we did meet, there'd be an exchange, very polite exchange of words. He invited me to the Oval Office a few years ago to talk about Iran, and I was invited back to talk to his national security team. But I haven't been invited back since I started to express serious doubts and reservations about the deal. I think it would be interesting to meet with him and have that conversation. I don't predict it's going to happen during his vacation.
That concerns me, because whenever I'm going to make a big decision that would involve other people, and it's certainly one that involves world security, because we know about mutual assured destruction and how everything works out, and who's involved, that I like to have my naysayers around me.
Oh, of course.
Not
of course.
my yes men.
I have the same thing. I always pick
Why
teams.
won't this work?
Well, Lincoln's Team of Rivals is a perfect example, Doris Kearns' book, where he brings in his enemies and his rivals and the people who he defeated for office to help him plan the Civil War, essentially. And I do the same thing. When I have any major decision, I always want research assistants or people who are antagonistic to my views, so we can make sure that all the issues are resolved. Whenever I do an argument in a case, in a court, I always have somebody pretend to be my opponent and come up with better arguments than my opponent will come up with, so I can literally figure out how to respond to them. I'm not sure the Obama presidency has done that as well as it could have done it. I think he hasn't had as much contact with contrary views as perhaps he should have.
I know that Valerie Jarrett, she has a connection here.
Oh, she's terrific. I like her very much.
And she's bright, but the thought process does concern me, and I know that it concerns our Arab allies.
Oh, yeah.
And that, we're not talking about an impact. This isn't Greece. This is Iran. Okay?
Right,
There are a lot of different issues going on
of course.
in the world.
Yeah.
But Iran has talked about, they're zeroed in. They have an agenda.
Of course.
And
we know that.
I'm worried about that, because they're not playing with bullets. They're talking about nuclear missiles. And Iran, as we know, was the main manufacturer of the IEDs that really maimed and killed
many Americans.
So
tragically.
many.
I know.
And most of them were manufactured in Iran.
And Iran is now going to be allowed to import weapons in 5 years and maybe sooner, which they will then give to Hezbollah. They will give them, who's killed many Americans, Hezbollah, Hamas, who's killed many Israelis, and other terrorist groups. Iran is the major exporter of terrorism in the world today. And to give them more weapons and to open up the potential that in 10 years or 8.5 years or 12 years, they will have nuclear weapons to put on their intercontinental ballistic missiles, which can reach Martha's Vineyard. Intercontinental ballistic missile of the kind that they're working on will be able to reach Martha's Vineyard. I don't think we're a big target.
But let's not be naive. Iran, let's add to it, that Iran has sold F-15s to Venezuela. F-15s? Okay, fine. They might not, their pilots in Venezuela might not know how to fly them so well. But if they are nuclear armed,
look,
does
remember
it really
what happened?
matter?
Remember what happened
Pilot?
last time one of our enemies tried to bring nuclear weapons into the Western Hemisphere? I was a young lawyer at the time. It was the Cuban Missile Crisis. And that was the closest we came to nuclear war in my lifetime. I hope we're not coming close again. But I tell you here now, Israel will not allow Iran to develop nuclear weapons. If they see Iran being on the verge, they'll do whatever it takes, and it would involve enormous sacrifice and risk to their air force. But they would do it. Now, Russia is going to make it harder because they're selling anti-ballistic missiles now to Iran that they claim would be capable of preventing an Israeli attack on Iran's nuclear reactor. But what I worry about is that this deal may make war more likely rather than less likely. And I think Congress has to look very, very hard at the terms of the deal. And I'm also concerned that the president may be right when he says the alternative to the deal is worse than the deal. He may be right about that, but why did he get us into a situation where the only alternatives are bad or worse? By taking the military option so early off the table, he eliminated our major leverage for a peaceful solution. As George Washington said, I think it was in his second inaugural address, the best way to prevent war is to make your enemy know you're ready to wage it.
Right.
And we took that off the table, and the sanctions were essentially taken off the table fairly early as well when China and Russia indicated that they were prepared to break the sanctions. So we didn't have much leverage, and we negotiated as equals, and the world's greatest superpower should never negotiate as an equal with a country like Iran.
That's the fundamental wrong
I
of this
think so.
whole process, and it didn't have to happen. And we still have 4 individuals that are being held by Iran.
Yeah.
You know, and you hear people say, well, why didn't we pressure or demand? You know, why didn't we demand that those 4?
Well, the president answered that yesterday in an interview, the other day, in an interview with Friedman of the New York Times. He said he was singular in his goal. He just wanted to do the nuclear thing. He didn't want to do terrorism. He didn't want to do freeing hostages. He wanted to focus only on the nuclear deal. Look, if he had gotten us a really, really, really good nuclear deal that would prevent forever, or for 25 or 30 years, Iran from developing nuclear weapons, that would be understandable. But if the end result is merely a moratorium for 8 years or 10 years in exchange for giving Iran hundreds of billions of dollars, which would enable them to expand their terrorist base, to expand their hegemony over Arab countries in the Middle East, to increase their threats against Israel, to develop intercontinental ballistic missiles that could endanger Europe and the United States, then it's not a good deal.
No, it's not. You know, you like to play chess, I bet.
I do. I think we've been playing checkers, and they've been playing chess, and they're the people who invented chess, and I think the Ayatollahs checkmated the president.
And doesn't this make Israel the tip of the spear?
Yeah, it always is. And, you know, historically, Jews have been the canary in the mine. Any country that's gone after Jews first has gone after other people afterward. Jews first, then come the Catholics, or then come the Mormons, or then come the Protestants, or then come the Muslims. It never stops just with the Jews. It could start with them, but it never stops with them. In Germany, it was gays, it was Slavs, it was Romani people, but it started with the Jews. The Jews were not the only targets, but all the Jews were targets. You couldn't escape if you were a Jew, unless you were Gertrude Stein. Now that's an interesting story.
Yes.
Gertrude Stein, a Jewish woman from the United States, became a Nazi collaborator. And she joined with the Gestapo. Her best friend was a Gestapo leader, and she lived in perfect peace during the entire Holocaust because she became a collaborator, and people still regard her as a hero. She's a despicable human being.
Wow.
Yeah.
She turned her heart and soul.
Yeah.
And she'll be paying for it.
Yeah.
Well,
you know, there are no heroes. I know on the Vineyard, either it's happened or it's going to happen soon, Mahatma Gandhi's grandson is speaking about the greatness of Mahatma Gandhi. People have to know Gandhi was a racist. He used the N-word to describe black people, the comparable word. And he told the apartheid regime down there, it's good to oppress blacks, just don't oppress Indians. We're Aryans. I mean, Gandhi did great things, but there are no heroes without clay feet. And nobody should look up to heroes and assume they're all going to be perfect. Even Atticus Finch, we now know from the new book, which I'm reading and love, wasn't the perfect person that many people have made him out to be. Everybody's human. Everybody has flaws.
And that's a good perspective. That's a good perspective. And your wisdom is definitely laid out in your 33 different books. And I really look forward to reading the next one. And it's always great to come up here and to chat.
Well, anytime. I love talking to you. You always ask me the best questions, and it's so relaxed. And it's the Vineyard, so let's enjoy it.
It's great to be here.
Good. Thank you so much. Be well.
And thank you for being with us here on MVTV. I'm Jim Powell, your host, speaking with Professor Alan Dershowitz here on Martha's Vineyard. And pick up a book. go out to the beach and read something. We've got lots of different books by Alan Dershowitz. Bunch of Grapes is a great place to go, or the Edgartown Bookstore. Anyways, just wanted to give them a plug. And thank you, Carl, for all your great work coming up here today. Thank you, our viewers. We'll see you again soon.